services are deteriorating, so people are understandably fed up. Their ire is aimed at the government, namely the center-right and center-left parties, which would be New Democracy and PASOK. And they're also, their ire is also aimed at those associated with the austerity measures, such as the Troika, so the EC, the IMF, and the ECB. Despite the fact that Greece has been on the receiving end of quite a bit of funding, that funding has not benefited citizens in a way that impacts their everyday existence. Unemployment is at 25%, and among young people, the number exceeds 50%. The Greek state is currently in need of tremendous systemic change. Unfortunately, most Greeks don't feel that their actions can bring about real change or have the type of impact that results in change. At the same time, social cohesion and civility are eroding as people are facing desperate situations, such as cancer medicines are in short supply or they're not available at all. People scavenging for food in trash bins has become a more common sight. Heating oil is considered a luxury that many are foregoing. The price has incidentally tripled since 2009. And there is a winter in Greece. This fraying of society was described in a recent New York Times article that quoted popular blogger Polítics, who said, "In Greece today, there are people with nothing to lose, and they're dangerous." He continues, "If something happened, it would be like pouring gasoline on a fire. From moment to moment, things change completely. It's not stable." It's the end of his quote. And there's no end in sight, given the austerity measures that are already in place and those that will surely be implemented going forward. People are insecure about their futures and their identities. After all, no one imagines himself or herself living in poverty. These dire conditions, as well as people's feelings of hopelessness, have paved the way for populist nationalism to take root, and not simply among the fringes or among extremists, but also among those who recognize the need for change, understand the importance of reforms, have been paying their taxes, and have been doing their personal part to see Greece become a functional state. In addition to feeling hopeless, many Greeks feel that justice doesn't exist. Tax evaders go unpunished. Politicians who have been accused of taking bribes or embezzling funds are not investigated, let alone punished. This feeling of injustice is not a new phenomenon by any means, but when there's talk of Greece being pushed out of the Eurozone or returning to the drachma, while the state conducts business as usual, the feeling of injustice is amplified as laws go unenforced or they're selectively enforced. And just to give a small example of this, recently, secret tax provisions came to light, and high-level members of the electrical union were the ones that broke the news. The tax itself, which is quite onerous, is based on the area of your dwelling, so the square meters of your apartment, let's say. The additional provisions that were passed without the public's knowledge provided a 30% discount to those individuals whose dwelling is 1,000 square feet or over, and a 60% discount for those whose dwelling is 2,000 square meters or over. So you can understand the public was just enraged when this news broke. The result is a lack of faith in the state, and by extension, a lack of faith in the EU for its role in supporting austerity measures that are clearly not felt to the same degree by the more privileged members of Greek society that can curry favor with politicians. The growing discontent with the political establishment, the unraveling of political and social institutions, and the feeling of injustice have enabled those with a range of populist views to capitalize on the situation. including parties such as the recently formed Independent Greeks, which began as a splinter group from New Democracy, the center-right, and of course, the Golden Dawn. Even the parties who represent the establishment, New Democracy and PASOK, even they've resorted to using populist rhetoric, using Greek sovereignty and Greek identity as a way to rally voters. All of this has led to a parsing of who is Greek and then who falls into the category of others. The historical litmus test for who is Greek is religion, which is Greek Orthodox. And then others, of course, are immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal, and then those who are of different faiths. Immigration was a central issue in the elections that were held this past spring. PASOK initiated the building of detention centers for individuals without appropriate paperwork. New Democracy built on that and increased border patrol and police roundups of immigrants, an initiative called Xenias Zefs, which has come under fire from human rights groups. And Golden Dawn infamously promised to remove the filth from Greece. Absent from the discourse has been a differentiation between immigrants who are asylum seekers, legal residents, very poor, or fully integrated after years of living and working legally in the country. Those seeking to spread an agenda of hate have taken advantage of this lumping together when discussing immigrants, painting a picture of an impoverished, criminal, distinctly non-Greek group. Not surprisingly, there's been a steady uptick in violence against various ethnic groups that on appearance are not Greek, so non-Caucasians, essentially. And this brings me to Golden Dawn. Golden Dawn is a neo-fascist, neo-Nazi, uber-populist nationalist party, take your pick, who hails its leader with Nazi-style salutes in parliament, no less. The group has risen from obscurity, initially polling at maybe 1 or 2% when the party first formed, which was in the mid to late 80s. And now they've captured 18 seats in parliament during the June election. And they campaign specifically against immigration. The party aims to create a Greece for Greeks only. And I might add here that only for those Greeks who support Golden Dawn's views. Although immigrants have been the main targets of the party's hate campaign, journalists, leftists, communists, the disabled, Jews, homosexuals, educated women, the severely ill, all seem to offend Golden Dawn's vision of the Greece they vow to create if they gain power. Part theocracy, being Greek after all means being Greek Orthodox, part Aryan nation, encapsulate Golden Dawn's vision, much of which startlingly resembles Hitler's. Since Golden Dawn entered parliament, violent attacks against immigrants have skyrocketed. And I'm going to take a quick pause here to show a quick video that's produced by Human Rights Watch, featuring victims themselves speaking. There are some very serious problems in Greece. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, the European Court of Human Rights, as well as others, have condemned Golden Dawn's actions and Greece for failing to stem racist violence. There are also many local voices condemning Golden Dawn as well, although many increasingly report that they're afraid to speak out against the party. Golden Dawn, however, believes it's providing a valuable service. According to Yanis Lagos, who is an MP of the party, he states, "For a lot of people in poor neighborhoods, we are liberators. The state does nothing." And this is what he shared on a TV chat show. And what he's referring to is that in these areas which have become so dangerous and crime-ridden, and there's no police presence, the Golden Dawn is there doing work in the neighborhood. Making the most of the law enforcement and social services vacuum, Golden Dawn has gained support by providing protection and other services to the elderly, like escorting them to go pick up their pension checks and then take them to the bank so that they can deposit it without getting robbed, since they're easy targets. And this is occurring in crime-ridden areas. And Golden Dawn is also regularly distributing food and clothes to the poor. That would be Greeks who are poor. The party's popularity only continues to grow, with public opinion polls showing Golden Dawn as the third most popular party after Syriza, which is the radical left, and New Democracy. Golden Dawn has been emboldened by its entrance into parliament. And despite its entrance by democratic procedures, the party flouts democracy and openly engages in unlawful activity. And as the video said, with impunity. Both The Guardian and the New York Times have reported on police collusion with the Golden Dawn, including serious allegations of police brutality, such as beatings and forced nudity against protesters arrested for clashing with Golden Dawn. So the police are essentially arresting the other guys, not Golden Dawn members. Another incident worth mentioning involved Golden Dawn's MPs and supporters shouting racial and homophobic epithets, destroying private property, blocking actors from entering or leaving the theater in an attempt to halt the staging of the Terrence McNally play, Corpus Christi. All the while the police just stood by. And this has been captured on video. And just for those of you who don't know, Corpus Christi is a play that depicts Jesus and the 12 apostles as gay men living in Texas. Ultimately, the play was closed down after a few days of this. Both the director and his parents had received death threats. And apparently credible and forceful enough threats that they decided it wasn't worth endangering their lives or the actors' lives. And just to wrap up, while Golden Dawn is a dangerous group that has to be dealt with, the greater danger is when people lose their faith in democratic institutions and instead believe that fascism and violence can resolve problems. So in this way, we see just how problematic populist nationalism can be in its most extreme form, and how it can flourish and has flourished and continues to flourish under the present conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your interesting presentation. We go from the south of Europe to the north of Europe now. But first of all, just remember that this seminar is organized by the European Liberal Forum and funded by the European Parliament. But I didn't remember to mention, and I would like to do that, it's supported, of course, by the CADEM Foundation, but also by the Frederick Naumann Foundation, by the Galidem, Mr. Hans van Merlo Stichting, IDI, EU2 think tank, and with the assistance also of Nous Catalans, .cat, that is led by Angel Colom and Eric Bertrand, that they are working on the integration of immigrants here in Catalonia. Well, thank you, all of you, for organizing this event. We go, as I mentioned, to the north now of Europe with Karina Jutila. She is also a doctor in social science for the University of Tampere. We have 4 doctors here at the table. That's a good honor. Director currently of the think tank E2 in Finland, and she has been, apart from different responsibilities, advisor of a really important party at the European Liberal family, that is the Center Party in Finland. She has written a lot of publications around the topic, but especially some publications that include analysis of the reasons and consequences of the rise of populist parties and movements around Europe. Karina, the floor is yours.
Yeah,
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's very nice to be in Barcelona now. When it's raining and it's quite cold in Finland.
Well, yeah, almost.
You have green colors here. We don't have. First of all, I would like to say that I've written an article concerning populism in Finland, and we translated it to English recently, so I think it's a interesting background material for my speech. First, I say a few words about the history of Finland and the current political situation, and then I will talk about populism, which means growing problem in Finland and a quite new phenomenon, and which worries us. So, to begin with, a few words about Finland. We were part of Sweden first, and then autonomous part of Russia. Finnish identity, it's quite important to understand the cultural identity if we are talking about nationalism. Is there a problem? All right. So we are quite young as a nation and country, independent country. Finnish nationalism is reflecting both the Nordic and European cultures, Western cultures, but also reflecting the position next to Russia. The current political situation has changed dramatically, I can say. 1.5 years ago, we had parliamentary elections, and the True Finns, the populist party, received a victory, I can say. Now we have 4 major parties: Conservative, Social Democrats, the True Finns, and the Centre Party. We have had a long period, over 60 years, of consensus and balance in political life, but it changed at the election. What is behind the situation? I think there are many mistakes made by the old parties. We didn't hear the worries of ordinary people, too much macro level governing, mistakes made during the financing of election campaigns. Style of speaking politics was too difficult. The distance between citizens and politicians was too long. What is the True Finns as a party? It's not a party of far right, nor is it purely a right-wing populist party. It is challenging contestant because it has so many fractions inside it. We don't know exactly what we are talking about. I was one of those who planned to campaign for parliamentary elections in the Centre Party 2 years ago, and the atmosphere was difficult, too difficult. It was like you knew beforehand that it was a war which you can't win. We were the Prime Minister's party. We had the responsibility. We knew what was going on. We were worried about human rights and growing populism, but we couldn't make changes. The Finnish media gave a huge amount of space to true Finns, and especially to Timo Soini, their leader. The feedback from ordinary citizens was quite depressive. For instance, when the Prime Minister Mari Kiviniemi had a speech against racism in Finland, there were a few news about it and a lot of feedback from ordinary people that it's not wise to speak like that. It's politically unwise. And about the media, they were fascinated by Timo Soini, the populist leader, and they didn't connect the true Finns to their sister parties and movements in Europe. I think it was a lazy deduction. The support base of true Finns is not homogeneous. It's male workers, voters from countryside, citizens with difficulties in life, and also this anti-immigration movement is inside the party. Two-thirds of the supporters are men, mostly low-educated, middle-aged, working class men. But there are also high-educated, wealthy voters who support the true Finns. Either they don't care of the well-being of the society, or they think that it's fun to play with a vote. It is a political play which is going on in Finland, I think. They have a charismatic leader. He is a traditional populist and a role model in the party. He tries honestly cope with the extremists inside the party. I can say that he is a nice man. He's a harmless, nice guy with interesting and funny and different style of speaking. He has excellent one-liners and so on. But on the other hand, he has accepted the racist candidates into his party. He isn't innocent as he looks like. He has given space to those ugly ones, those who use scared, often low-educated young people without judgment. Those racist candidates, and now few, 5, 6 are now into parliament. They have role models such as Jörg Haider and Benito Mussolini. So they are in the parliament now. The fraction is inside the parliament now. It's not a huge problem as it is in Greece, but it's a problem in Finland also. What should we do? First, few words about their politics. What is the growth based on? It uses both the old parties and our mistakes, as well as the European Union, as fuel. There is nationalism, critique of immigration policy, bureaucracy, climate change and so on. I must say that this party is a conservative party, not a progressive party. And a few words about nationalism and the true Finns. The party sees itself as defending the Finns, the original Finn, will of the people. And they think that they have a privilege to define what the people is as an entity. What should we do? I think we should think about education, school system, media, parties, NGOs, think tanks. We have tasks to do now. There is absolutely lack of knowledge and abilities to deal with new things. There is too many people who are afraid and can't handle new things. A lack of self-confidence also. And I think sooner the better we should think about what should we do, which are the methods and medicines to cope with the problem, not just to analyze the problem and be aware of it. I think it's time for action. And who are the players and to whom they play? I think this is a key question. In a populist party, there are those who are innocent ones, I can say, if there is innocent ones in the world. But they are used. They are used by politicians and sort of, I say, ugly leaders. And we should have our activities towards these problems. It can't be so that they have their position on the field and we are in the audience. What the others should do, they have their play. What we should do, we as parties, NGOs, think tanks, newspapers and so on. There are a few ways. I wrote these 4 words from an article which E2 published before the parliamentary elections. And I think we must have a combination of isolating, challenging, adapting, participating. And adapting means not that we should copy their ideas or opinions, not at all. I mean, we should adapt their themes so that they don't have privilege or first-hand right to discuss with ordinary people. We have been lazy, we haven't been aware of these things, and they did it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina, for your presentation. And now we go to the following one. You change here also? The following one from Hungary. It's Dr. Csaba Tóth. He is Doctor in Political Science at the ELDR Faculty of Law and Political Science in Budapest, and also Master in Sociology at the same faculty. Currently Director of Strategy at the Republikon Institute, and also lecturer at the Faculty of Law and Political Science in Budapest. And he also has written a lot of important publications, but mainly about political science and political system in Hungary. Csaba, you have the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is not a fun panel so far, right? We have a lot of not so uplifting stories about populist nationalism, and I cannot promise you to be any more uplifting with the Hungarian example. I came to tell you, and I would like to provide a narrative of what I believe happened in Hungary. And the narrative or the story I would like to share with you is this. How can a country in which is not by itself overly nationalistic, which is not a country in which nationalism, at least in the last 20 years, has been a huge problem, and a country which used to be, at least in the 1990s, a model in the Central European region for economic success, but also for a stable democracy, how can it go from this via the decisions of political actors and politicians? How can it become one of the biggest problematic points when it comes to democracy and human rights issues in Hungary? And here is what I believe happened. We had a country in Hungary where, you know, we had the Trianon Treaty in Hungary, which meant that a lot of Hungarian territories were given away in 1920 to other nations. And there was a poll when Hungarians were asked, would you like to invade those borders with force? And 16% of the respondents said, yes, we would like to take them back by force. Now, 16%, you can say, well, it's too much, but I would not consider that dangerously high. There's 16% of, I would not necessarily say lunatics, but people who might not respect the present border, but it wasn't a big issue. In 2004, we had a referendum in which the Hungarian nationalists wanted to give double citizenship to Hungarians living abroad, which was considered a very nationalistic decision. It was defeated just 8 years ago. So we did not necessarily have a very nationalistic political system electorate. What happened was that somewhere in 2008 and 2009, as a result of the economic crisis and as a result of many of the mistakes that the politicians in government made, a right-wing, formerly, I would say conservative, formerly liberal, but conservative party, Fidesz, came into power with a very strong anti-establishment message. And then I think because of three reasons: because of calculation, because of cynicism, and because of sometimes commitment, decided to embark on a nationalistic course. I think this is a lesson which tells us that whereas I believe many political elites in Europe, many political elites of established parties want to fight this sentiment, want to fight for Europe. Certainly I believe some in Germany, but in other countries as well. In Hungary, the political elite of this party chose what seemed the easier path, and instead of fighting this sentiment, decided not only to embrace it, but to enhance it and make it more nationalistic. And I'll give you, and that's my presentation is going to be about. So just a bit of background. In 2010, we had the Hungarian election. What you see there as the, does this work? Yeah, what you see here, you see it? Yeah. This is Fidesz, the party I was talking about, a right-wing, formerly conservative party, which got 2/3 of the seats in parliament. And this pink here is Jobbik, which will be our own far-right party, much like the parties that were just discussed. So altogether, these parties now control, they're not in an alliance, but they control the vast majority of the Hungarian parliament. In the election, they received about 70% of the vote, and then we have what we so-called the democratic opposition, for lack of a better term, the Social Democrats with around 20%, and the Green Party with around 7 or 8%. So you can see this green, sorry, this is yellow, not green. This yellow organization, Fidesz, gaining 2/3 majority, and then using this 2/3 majority to enhance areas of populism and nationalism. Now I divided this into 4+1 areas, and I'll talk about all of them in detail, but just firstly, to using the victory as a populist mandate to reshape the constitutional system. Now, many politicians in many countries always say, well, I have the mandate from the people, so I can do this. But Fidesz has taken this to a new extreme in Hungary. Whenever something happens, they say, well, 2/3 of the people support us. If there's any new law, if there is the new media law, for instance, which they enacted, which severely restricts opposition possibilities. There's a new electoral system, also severely restricting opposition candidates, even from filing. There's now registration system, which means that you need to register to vote prior, a year prior, and in the last 3 weeks you cannot actually register. So if you change your mind on the last day, you can't vote. Why? Because the people wanted this, is the rhetoric they use. So this is one element of the populist rhetoric. And then these are other elements, economic policy. Let's get into economic policy. Now, we are used to economic populism from left-wing parties and far-right parties. We're not necessarily used to economic policies from parties which follow a sort of free market agenda. Which is what Fidesz did. So Fidesz has a new, what they call unorthodox mix, which is a mixture of three things. One, on the one hand, they do have free market liberal ideas, flat tax and a commitment to deficit reduction. But unlike some other free market parties in Europe, they use a very nationalistic and anti-European agenda to use this. What do they say? They are saying this, and I draw your attention here, they are saying this, we need to do these austerity measures because Brussels forces us, because the Commission says that we need to have austerity. We would otherwise be spending all the money we have, but the evil Commission wants us to take austerity measures, which has very little basic for truth, obviously. They also try to combine this economic policy with nationalization and protectionism, which is an interesting mixture. On the one hand, you have flat tax, commitment to deficit reduction. On the other hand, you have very nationalistic and protectionist policies favoring big Hungarian companies are not that big, favoring relatively big Hungarian companies. And you also have what we call targeted taxes against certain multinational companies. What the government is saying is basically this. Oh, I see the telecom sector, which is owned mostly by Germans and also by some British. They're doing too well. Why don't we just take their profit away and give it to the people? And when I say to the people, that means Hungarian companies close to the government. It's also an interesting element of the nationalist attitude, they say. Now, this economically does not work. Why? Because it undermines investor confidence, even though the macro system might work in some areas. And we haven't talked much about economics here, but it's an important element of the nationalist populism in Hungary, economic populism, even from a right-wing government. It doesn't work because if an investor sees that at any point of time, if he makes too much profit, the government will come and say, oh my God, you're making too much profit, why don't I redistribute it? You need to contribute more to the people. The banks against the people, you all know this rhetoric, and this is what the government then uses. Second element, why can the government do this, by the way, is because Hungarian people, like many people in Central Eastern Europe, have overwhelmingly left-leaning economic attitudes. For those of you who can't read because it's a bit far away, is it the government's responsibility to give jobs to everyone? 44% say entirely, and you can see all these numbers in the upper half, which mean that only about 8 to 9% people believe that it's not the government's job to create jobs for everyone. Next one. Nationalism against Europe. This here is what's called, it's really Orwellian, it's called the Peace March. The Peace March, which we had 2 days ago, it's actually saying we will not be a colony and we will fight against Europe, but they call it a Peace March. It's really funny. This is what it says, we won't be a colony, we will have Orban, we will have Viktor Orban. Now what, and another one, is Hungary is fighting against the IMF as well. Now, the government is right now spending public money on advertisements, against the IMF, saying things like, we will not give in to the IMF demands, whilst conducting negotiations with the IMF. Now, you know the IMF can't fight back. The IMF can't go out and buy advertisements and say the government is lying. That's just not the way the IMF can operate. So you see how they're using the nationalistic rhetoric, creating a scapegoat out of the European Union and out of the IMF with these messages, which are actually printed, again I say, from public money in news organizations, which say what we will say no to. What it actually says is to the decrease of social services. We want respect from the IMF, and this one says we say no to certain taxes proposed by the IMF. I will also talk a bit about Euroscepticism. Because it's the third element of the government policy, and I won't have time to show you all my charts, and because I want to get into the anti-Roma rhetoric. Now, of course, and this I think is also a very important lesson. This is a comparative study by Eurobarometer on how European Union is viewed. Now, where is the European Union most popular? In Bulgaria and Romania and some other Nordic and Danish countries, but you can see that initially, in Hungary, European Union used to be very popular. Why? Because it meant different things. It meant a sense of belonging. It meant that we're finally accepted to the club. It meant that we can be now part of the bigger European collective. And so when you see the rising anti-European attitudes of Hungarians by the government, it's a very different sort of Euroscepticism than you see, for instance, in Britain or the Netherlands or some other countries, which I think, to paraphrase the theme of this seminar could be, I don't know, democratic Euroscepticism. In Hungary, you see more of a populist Euroscepticism, a Euroscepticism that says we will not be a colony of the European Union. A recurring theme of the Prime Minister is saying that the West is declining, and so we need unorthodox suggestions, and in those unorthodox suggestions we should embrace unorthodox methods which are not supported by Europe. Now, as you can see, as all messages, they have an ample of truth in that. Yes, the West does have problems. Many people talk about it. But in a country like Hungary with 10 million people, 80% of our GDP from exports, in the middle of Europe with no resources, no oil to speak of, it's very difficult to find a different economic model that you can put against the European Union. What they always say is, well, we have such good Hungarian soil, but the foreigners are going to take it. And this, I say, is not just from a fringe far-right organization, it's from actually the government party. Again, why? Because of part cynicism and part commitment. And then I come to my last point, which is which was the anti-Roma sentiment in Hungary. The government is populistic, against Euroscepticism, and very nationalistic, but it is not anti-Roma. The Roma minority is attacked, however, furiously by the political party Jobbik, which I believe is also an example of how you can create a successful political movement out of hate against a minority group. Now, people don't like the Roma in Hungary. This is a poll when we asked the very basic, it's a very crude question, do you like the Roma people? And 21% said, on a scale of 1 to 9, not at all, and then 70% said, well, not so much. And you can see that only this amount of people, around 15%, said that they do like the Roma. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. Again, another of my favorite charts. Would you vote for your favorite party's candidate if it were a woman, a Roma, or a person of Jewish origin? Sorry for the crude translations. And as you can see, 50% of the people would not vote for a Roma candidate for office, even if it was filed by their own favorite party. Now, this, as I said, is not a new phenomenon. What's new is that there comes this new party, Jobbik, and they say that we're going to build a political organization based on that. And they started to talk very tough, just like I've just heard from those from your two countries. They invented the term Roma crime. What is Roma crime? Crime committed by the Roma people, obviously. They invented the term Roma Mercedes. Roma Mercedes, it's a Mercedes driven by rich Roma criminals. Now, of course, there was once a US president who talked about welfare queens riding on Cadillacs, if you recall that. But it's something different. It's saying, it's inventing a word, obviously, I don't need to explain this to you, suggesting that all Roma are criminals. And all the research in Hungary shows that there is not really anything you can do about it. In fact, when human rights groups started to attack and this is maybe the saddest part in it, when human rights groups started to attack Jobbik for inventing these words, their popularity just went up. Why? Because the majority of the population does agree with them in those issues, sad to say that. We had a research conducting that whenever on the political agenda the Roma issue appear, no matter in what context, it immediately raises the support for the Jobbik. Why? Because in that regard, it's what people agree. So I came to you with two warnings. One, some of my friends in Central Europe believe that Euroscepticism and attacking Europe it's a free market thing to do. If we say, well, Europe is too powerful, we shouldn't give too much money to Brussels, and then we will have all these free market initiatives like, you know, from British or Czech or other people. My message would be that that's not necessarily a case. If you go too much into Euroscepticism, at least in my country, that will lead to the very ugly nationalism that I'm sure from your history books you're all familiar with. Number two of my warning, so to speak, is that when you unleash nationalism and national sentiment, even in a country that isn't used to be that nationalistic, you don't know where you're going. You don't necessarily know where you're going. Even if, as I said, I believe the leader of Fidesz, Viktor Orbán, he was a leading anti-communist. He was a member of the liberal family for a very long time. And I still believe he, obviously, I used to work near politics. I believe all politicians somewhere deep down believe that they're right. They don't want to hurt people. Part of this is commitment. Part of this, he believes that Hungary needs a different path. And because he embarked on this journey, there's no turning back. As he sees his support evaporating, he just gets more and more nationalistic. Now, on a positive note, Hungary or Central Europe, it's not very Eastern Europe. It's fortunately, the people do not buy this. So right now, the popularity of the government is very low. They don't have the support anymore. But they do have the institutional means to make some of these decisions permanent, and that is the real danger. Sorry if I overstep my time. That would be. Thank you so much for your attention.